I can go easy now first.
Yeah, you do it first.
Easy now first.
No, easy now is how it goes.
Easy now.
That's the one, man. Hey, guys. Welcome back to the Drive Talk podcast powered by Michelin. Talking about Michelin, that's a nice T-shirt you got there, mate.
Oh, you didn't get the memo, did you, this morning?
We both rocked up in exactly the same T-shirt. Got that from the bike shed show, didn't we?
Yeah, it's a pretty cool T-shirt. In fact, I took mine to the Nürburgring a good few weeks ago, and I couldn't remember where I got it from, and you reminded me it's from the bike shed.
Yeah, and I had it on during the recording of one of the podcasts at the Nürburgring, but I had a jumper on over it, so you didn't actually see it.
Ah, okay.
Unlucky. But while we're on the subject of bikes, you're long-termer. So I don't think we've talked about this on podcast because you did the most epic road trip on that bike. And I'd love to just have a bit of a chat about it, tell us what it's like, because you've gone from hardly doing any riding at all to riding to the Alps on a motorbike.
Yeah, it was
that a good idea.
It was a big challenge. It was something that I'd sort of set myself last summer when I got my license. I said this year I need to either do a track day on a bike, which is looking less likely as winter approaches very quickly, or go to the Alps on the bike and do something that you and I would do in a car normally. Well, firstly, yeah, the bike went back a couple of weeks ago, and yeah, it kind of went
are you
back.
Pining for it?
I am, and it went back just as that lovely late summer weather arrived. Literally on the day that lovely sort of 10 days, 2 weeks of lovely weather we got. That, and I am missing it. But I had it for 3.5 months, believe it or not.
No way.
Yeah, long time.
Wow.
And I did lots of fun adventures on it, but nothing compared to that. And as you say, I did, like, my longest journey until I went to the Alps was going to see my parents who live in central London, and I live near Silverstone. So that was about an hour and a half maximum each way, an hour and 20 minutes. And that I thought, oh, wow, that's an adventure on my adventure bike. But no, nothing like 6 days, 1,900 miles.
Wow.
And
which is a lot in a car.
It's a lot in the car, and most of them, well, no, that's a lie. I'd say at least half of those miles, so 1,000 miles, were mountain passes and back roads. It was, honestly, mate, it was an amazing experience, an experience of a lifetime. One that I'll probably never repeat on my own again, because one thing I discovered very quickly was it's quite a lonely thing to do on the bike. It was great for the mind and great to sort of achieve it, but the next step for that for me is to do it with some mates like Chris Barron Grumble, who we had on the podcast, with comms on. I've got this lovely Cardo big shout out to Cardo, actually, intercom system, best in the business. And that's great, links up with your phone and stuff, just like your Bluetooth does with your car and your nav, whatever you want it to. But when you're with a group of riders, you can also link your systems up.
Oh, cool.
So, or if I've got like Lou on the back as a passenger and she has one on her helmet, so you can communicate. And in fact, just before I gave the bike back, me and Chris went out for a ride, and it was brilliant because, well, we know how funny Chris is. You know, you got the banter while you're following someone like Chris, and it was just brilliant. So I think that'll be the next adventure next year. But yeah, it was just a breathtaking week. It was a really different. I think the way you can look at it is, and you can appreciate this as someone who likes your convertibles, and I think when you're down in the Alps, something like your Boxer GTS is just the perfect car for that sort of trip, because you've got the roof open and it really adds a dimension. And then I think being on the bike just adds another dimension, because you feel completely exposed in good and bad ways. You don't take quite as many risks as you might do in a car, because you can see what would go wrong. Whereas in the car, you're sort of below the barrier a lot of the time. But when you're on the bike, you're like, okay, I get my braking a little bit late here. I came down Alps d'Huez quite fast, and I thought, well, I don't want to outbrake myself here, because I'm going to come off second best.
Because I was watching you on socials, and I'm actually next year planning a trip to that part of France on my road bike, because you did Alpe d'Huez, you did Galibier, you did lots of iconic Tour de France climbs, and I'm watching going, I'd love to cycle up there on my bike. Going down's fun, but the uphill bit's painful. But it's just something about that part of the world, and it's so beautiful up in the mountains. I can imagine on a motorbike, that must be cool.
It was cool, and I think you would love it on the bike, and I think that's something I would love to. I did do Alps d'Huez on my Brompton many years ago, and that was a challenge. But I tell you what, that it's the views and stuff that actually you get these constant rewards, because every time you do a hairpin and you head up another stretch, the view changes and gets better most of the time. So it's almost like there's another little reward. And on top of that, you got the beautiful air, which obviously the further up you go, the less oxygen you have, but it's such fresh, beautiful air. So yeah, it's really good. Anyone that's thinking about it, if you got your bike license, I can't recommend it high enough. I think the worst, well, not the worst thing, the hardest thing of that trip, or one of the dullest moments is, and I'm sure a lot of bikers can relate to this, they're not much fun on the motorway. I mean, the car isn't much fun on the motorway, but you can deal with it in a car, set the temperature right, whatever. You haven't got wind blowing at your head and whatever else. Whereas on the bike, it's just...
It must be really physical, because you must be constantly making micro adjustments just to keep yourself. So in a car, you get a numb bum, right? And maybe it's achy arms, but on a bike, your whole body must be... I can imagine your arse is quite sore after 3 or 4 hours, but your whole body must be.
Yeah, well, that was my big concern, because again, relating back to the fact I'd done an hour and a half, I went from an hour and a half to 6 days straight, and I was really worried about that. I think I've got, can I say a firm bum on this podcast?
Yeah, you can.
Yeah. I've got a relatively firm bum from many years of cycling. I think I've retained that somehow, even when I was really unfit a couple of years ago. So I wasn't too concerned about that, but I just thought everything else. And actually on day 3 or 4, I was right in the middle of the Alps somewhere. I'd got to the top of this pass. I can't even remember where it was, but it was very quiet. It was the one bit of rain I saw on the trip. It started to rain a little bit. It was a bit cooler as well, which was a nice welcome change, because some of the days it was mid to high 30s, which is horrible on a bike in leathers. It's like someone having a massive hairdryer just going... So it was cool, but so I got to this point, and you're saying about aches. So my bum was relatively numb. My arms were hurting, my wrists were hurting. I seemed to have hand and arm pump everywhere. My neck, I had these horrible shooting pains in my neck from sort of it, and literally everything. Just the more I thought about it as I was getting to the top of this climb, the more I could feel things, because I was focusing on the pain. And I got to the top of this climb, and I got off the bike, and I remember just thinking, looking at the nav, and it was like 4.5 or 5 hours to go to the hotel. And then it started raining, and I just thought at that point, I was like, well, have I bitten off more than I can chew here? This is mentally and physically, both of those at that point, it was like overwhelming. And I was sitting there, and I thought, okay, well, I've got no choice but to carry on. There's no one around me. And I was just about to get on the bike, and this other GS, and let me tell you, when you're in the Alps, and you know what a GS is, you spent some time around them, you can hear the engine note. Every 99% of the bikes there are GSs, they're everywhere. So I heard this other GS coming up the hill as I put my helmet on, got ready, reversed the bike out, and was about to take off. This GS comes flying past me on Italian plates. I assume it's a couple, guys riding at the front, his girlfriend's on the back, or wife, whatever. And they've gone flying past me in this wet, damp conditions. So I was like, wow, they're on it. So I've gone, followed them down the first straight, turned in, hit this join. Because in France and a lot of the Alps, all the roads crack up from the extreme weather, right? Because it's, minus 20, and then it's plus 35, plus 40. So you got these massive cracks, and they put this like sealant, almost like our bathroom sealant, And it is like that in the dry. In the dry, it's fine, but as soon as it gets wet, that sealant, even in a car, when you hit it, you feel the car move, twitch. So you can imagine on a bicycle or a motorbike, when it's wet, you hit that, and it's like, oh, it feels like the whole bike's moved like a foot. It's probably only moved an inch. So the first corner, I've hit that and gone, oh. And so I thought to myself, I've got 2 choices here. I either just spend the next 5 hours suffering all the way back to the hotel, feeling sorry for myself, focusing on the pains that I'm getting, or I grit my teeth and I cling onto the back of that GS that's obviously being ridden by an Italian bloke who knows what he's doing, and just follow him. I thought, you know what? I'm going to do that. So I was literally replicating everything they were doing, or trying to at least. And, you know, I was losing time everywhere and trying to make up a bit of time. It was like a challenge in my head. It was like playing a simulator or something. And I hung on to the back of them for 45 minutes till we got to the bottom of this climb. We got to a town. By that point, the weather's got better. The pains had gone away because I'm focusing so hard on following them. And it was a real moment for me because it was right in the middle of the trip. It was right when all the pains and everything were maximum. And it was right when my mental sort of energy was on the floor. And these people, they had no idea who I was. They probably didn't realize at all what they'd just done for me, but they towed me out of this problem, of this situation, you know. And I was just like, I remember just thinking, oh my God, this is the best thing. And I just let them go at the bottom of the village. I was like, I'm safe now. I feel good. Now I've only got 4 hours to go. I can deal with that. But yeah, it was just one of those moments, one of many, but that particular one, it was a real sort of dragged me out of a bad situation. And yeah.
Wow.
It was great. But yeah, hopefully one day, it'd be great. I'd love to do something with you on a bike out there one day, and it'd be a bicycle.
Yeah, definitely.
And I think you need to get your motorbike license as well, mate.
I don't think that's going to happen. I value my marriage too much.
I was going to say, yeah. The boss has spoken. Yeah.
So how long is it going to be before you buy a bike?
Well, I mean, the idea 12 months ago when I passed my test, I was like, I'm going to get one because actually, finance rates. I know we talked about it recently on a podcast in terms of finance rates for cars and stuff. Bikes, even with the higher interest rates, they're still very affordable in comparison. The big problem with bikes, which I didn't thankfully have to worry about with a press bike, is insurance. People, a nice bike. I know people that are paying 4, 5, 6 grand a year.
What?
Yeah, for bike insurance, which then all of a sudden those £200 or £250 monthlies for a really nice bike, that doesn't matter because you're paying that again at least on insurance.
You've got to use it a lot if you're paying that.
Yeah, you got to use it a lot if you're paying that, and you don't. I don't care what anyone. I don't. I didn't in my situation because I have a car, and I think even most people that have got bikes have got cars as well, and you tend not to use them all the time as much as you should. So it's a difficult one, but I really want one. But with the way YouTube ad revenue is going, I don't think I might be getting a C90 Cub moped or something. But yeah, let's see. Watch this space. I'd like to try some different brands next year and see what they're all about. But I certainly enjoyed the GS. And yeah, Neil, if you're listening, I really appreciate that bike. It was great. It was fantastic. And yeah, look forward to more adventures next summer.
So I'm going to use a motorbike. Oh, I could use push bike as well as a segue into one of the things we want to chat about. So this episode, we thought it's like the kind of chat that you have down the pub with your mates, where you kind of just let off a whole bunch of steam about stuff that's winding you up about cars and stuff.
Yep.
So my segue is motorbike or push bike. And you talked about going to see your mum and dad in London. So if you want to drive into London now, there's this thing called ULEZ.
Yep.
Thanks, Sadiq Khan. So I thought we'd have a chat about ULEZ and just to offload really, because I guess for me, first up, I understand the concept of trying to tidy up the air and air pollution and environment in a city. However, there's a line I think where you need to just be careful that you're not screwing over the normal citizen of London.
Yep.
And I know quite a few people live in town that have literally either had to get rid of their car or change their car and change their lifestyle completely because of ULEZ.
Yeah, well, I think it's been happening for a long time since, way before ULEZ with the introduction of the congestion charge and the way that moved around. They expanded it, they reduced it. And I remember when it first came, the congestion charge, my parents live in Paddington, right in the centre of London, actually right on the border of where it is, or where it was. No, where it back is now. That's right, because they did expand it, and then they.
I never know where the congestion charge is.
Yeah, and I think that's part of it.
I always forget to say it.
Yeah, well, so back when they introduced it the first few years, I think residents of London got a reduction, especially if you're in the zone. Wow, thank you very much. You give me a reduction so I can use my car. But the problem is back then, and my old man is more forgetful than me, so you can imagine how forgetful he is. He would go out to work in his car and just honestly forget to pay the charge because, he'd spent 50 years of his life there previously and hadn't paid it. But back then you couldn't set up an automated account. You had to do each one manually. So so it was almost set up on purpose as a failure to everyone.
Not as a revenue making.
Surely not.
Really?
No.
I can't believe that.
Yeah, I know. Who would have thought?
No.
So that's always been the case. And the other thing that's always been the case in London, and is continuing to be, as we're going to get onto, is this whole, you need to be in this car because that passed our standards. Well, it passed our standards for a year or two until we change the standards, and then it won't. And I remember it was always this based on the CO2, because I used to live on the outskirts of London, and I had a smart car, MHD something or other, because it was 98 grams of CO2. And the reason I had that, well, it was a great little city car where we live.
Sorry, I've got this image of you in a smart car. It'd be like you driving one of them little car company cars.
It was. I was like Donkey Kong or something. Yeah. But actually, you know what? It's funny because the smart car's tiny, but actually, have you driven one?
Donkey Kong.
Have you driven a smart car though? Well, actually, anyone that has will know what I'm talking about. When you get in a smart car, you're actually massively surprised. Oh, Patrick, do we need to call an ambulance?
I just got this picture.
Oh no!
Sorry, Karen.
It's all right. It's okay.
So no.
Back to me driving a smart car. No, the cabin in a smart car is really big. And it's strictly a two-seater. Well, the smart for two is anyway. But my point being is, me and my ex were forced into buying that because at the time, if you had a car that was under 99 grams, whatever it is, CO2 measurement, you got free congestion charge. So we got that, and no more than 6 months after buying it, that changed to 79. And at that time, there was literally nothing apart from some hybrids, which when you read that on a hybrid, it's pretty skeptical anyway, because not many people use hybrids how they should be used. They just use the underpowered motor. And then the 79 changed to 49, and then I think that was abolished altogether. And it was electric cars only, and as we're about to talk about, that's changing. And it's so they just keep, the whole thing is, well, as far as they're concerned, is to make, they're trying to make everything greener and reduce carbon, but actually all they did for those years and continue to do are encouraging us to go out and buy more cars to tick a load of boxes that or goalposts that keep getting moved. Do you know what I mean? It's impossible to keep up with the Joneses by doing that.
I mean, I didn't realise what a hot topic the ULEZ thing was until be about 9 months, maybe 12 months ago. One of he's now a mate, he was a subscriber, and we met on a number of times. I've driven his cars. He lives in the new ULEZ zone when it expanded. Yep. And he got a few cars, and one of his favourite cars he was going to have to basically get rid of because it didn't comply to ULEZ, and it was going to cost him, was it £25 a day or £12.50 a day every time he used it. So he drew up a list of like 20 cool cars that were ULEZ compliant, and I did a video on it.
Oh, I saw it. Yeah.
Oh my God. I mean, I thought the EV debate was, but I mean, the amount of people, it was like, oh, it's not about EV, it's about, ULEZ shouldn't happen at all. And then, do you know the brown car guy? I can't remember his name now. Anyway, I've met him so many times on channels. I just know him as the brown car guy. He's like Mr., trying to abolish ULEZ. And you start kind of realizing just the amount of feeling. And then when you look at the ULEZ zone expansion, I just don't get it. The fact it includes Heathrow, it's just like, who thought that up? Who thought that was a good idea?
Well, The accountant.
Sadiq Khan. No, that's right. Yeah.
I mean,
Can you imagine if you're a family going on holiday? Because I think you if you drive into it, it's every day you're in it. So even if your car was parked up, I think you have to pay. No, do you not? Only when you pay it. So Pat says that's all right. £12.50 in and out.
Yeah, but then congestion on top of that if you're in central London, right? Yes. Yeah. So
27 total if you do that.
27 quid. But as you say, the Heathrow thing, it's a really good point.
Or if you're
it's right on the board. So they said anything within the M25, I think initially, which the Heathrow, strictly speaking, Heathrow, strictly speaking, is just inside the M25. But on top, so you got innocent people again that they're targeting, and you've also got, how else or you can use the Heathrow Express, which is about 400 quid return to London now. Which isn't it's a very effective thing if you need to, if you're based, especially in Paddington or whatever. But it's not just that. Airports, okay, so let's say low-cost airports like Stansted and Luton, they've always charged for drop-offs and pickups, Rob, for the last 10, 15 years. Heathrow have now started doing that as well. So you can't even drop someone off there without, I think it's £5. You have to pay just the
plus the ULEZ if you're not in a ULEZ.
Just the ULEZ plus the. So you just think it's not fair. And once again, I think with all of it, it's just picky on the working class or it's the rich don't need to worry so much about it, but it's the people that the people that do need to worry about it are just getting punished massively, and I think it's just a shame, isn't it?
And I think there's going to be a couple of things. Bear in mind the podcast we did recently about kind of used cars and stuff.
Yeah.
Firstly, there's a whole bunch of people who probably can't really afford to change their car out for a more modern one. They're looking at a budget of maybe a couple of £100,000 for sorry, that's Sadiq Khan. A couple of grand for a new car, not 50, 60 grand.
Yep.
So just the logistics of doing that on and there's this, is it a case where actually the agenda is to just get us all out of cars completely and get us onto public transport?
I think so. I think a lot of it is that to stop us moving around, travelling, and it's just, it's all becoming unaffordable, isn't it? Everything is just so expensive when it comes to personal travel, whether it's flying, but even public transport. I mean, it's just... where I live, I don't live too far from Bicester, so I'm really close to a railway line to get into Marylebone, central London. And actually, you know what? As a car guy, I don't take the train enough. If you ignore the cost of it, and when I do, I love it. And probably same when you sit there, you get your laptop out,
loads of editing done.
You can do these things that you just can't do in a car, especially if you're driving. So it's a really nice, if you get a seat, and it's really nice. But the cost of it, it's like. It's just, I just can't justify it. I forget what it is, but it's something silly like 40, 50 quid return. And it's like, it's going to cost me half of that in the car, even in something like my M3 and fuel. And I just feel like I'm getting ripped off. And a lot of the time I'll be like, no, I don't care. I'm going to get in my car. I'm going to sit in traffic because I'm not going to pay those prices.
If you had a Tesla, right, you could charge it for much less. But so you'll see where I'm going with this. So the whole thing is, okay, get an EV, because EVs, you can go into ultra low emission zones. We're talking about London, by the way. They're all over the place.
Yep.
Most big cities now, Birmingham, Manchester, Bristol, they're all looking at kind of reducing cars into the centre of their cities for emissions reasons and stuff. So you think, okay, I'll get an electric car then, because with an electric car, I don't have to worry about ULEZ because they're zero tailpipe emissions. That's a whole other podcast as to whether they are zero tailpipe emissions or not. Well, they are. Nothing comes out the tailpipe. That doesn't mean they don't emit stuff somewhere else.
Yep.
And I don't pay... I'm not going to use road tax.
Oh, yeah.
Vehicle excise duty.
Yes.
We haven't had road tax in this country since the 50s.
Road fund licence, it used to be.
It used to be, and then but it's a vehicle excise duty.
Yeah. Basically, once again, it's them just getting away from us. You're complaining about the state of the roads.
It's just basically they take the money from that and use it for lots of other things, not just the roads.
Because we don't pay enough tax,
but
as it
at
is.
the moment, there is that. At the moment, so an electric vehicle, zero emissions vehicle, pays zero vehicle excise duty, no road tax until 2024.
Yes, 2024 or 5?
2024, 2025.
2025.
April 2025. That was
Yes.
it. I've got me. So yeah, April 2025, we start paying vehicle excise duty on electric cars.
Yep. And then December 2025, you've got to pay congestion charge in London on EVs.
Oh no! Hold on a minute. But I've just got rid of my diesel that wasn't ULEZ compliant and bought an electric car, so I don't pay any. Oh.
Yep.
Oh.
And this is exactly what what I was talking about 10 minutes ago was just they just keep doing it, and it's just like so that so you're telling me it just doesn't make any sense. They're saying that these cars are completely green or amazing for the environment. We should all go out and buy them, and then some people do, mostly based around avoiding paying company car tax, etc. But whatever, there are people that actually go out and buy Teslas and stuff. But then you do that, but then you still get stung. but how? Like you get stung by paying a fine for you get charged. You get given a fine that is based around your vehicle basically polluting the city, but you bought that vehicle because you've been told that it's not a pollutant, essentially. Yeah. So how does it? It's all double standards. It just doesn't make any sense. But unfortunately, this is. I mean, and if you haven't seen it coming, it's coming. I mean, all the grants have stopped.
Oh yeah, but I've got an electric car as a company car because I don't pay benefit in kind.
Yeah, but that's changing as well, isn't it?
It is. It's frozen at 2%, I think, until 2025.
Yeah.
But it's likely to go up there.
Yeah.
So I did a video. Oh man, it's a year ago now, but just about how. So if you think about the moment with petrol and diesel cars, what percentage of a litre of petrol? Let's say you're paying £1.50 for a litre of petrol. How much of that is tax? So it's a very high proportion of that is tax. So if we all stop using petrol cars and diesel cars and get into electric cars, where's that going to come from? Where's that taxation revenue going to come from? Now, I guess there's one argument that says there's still going to be an awful lot of petrol and diesel cars around for quite some time, even though you can't buy one post 2035. Let's see if that deadline moves. But that's still going to come from somewhere.
Yeah.
And the next question is, well, okay, so if we've got fines for going in cities based on our emissions, the next logical thing is that we will be and if road, I'm going to use the word road tax. It's not road tax. It's vehicle excise duty, but
I know.
Let's agree it's road tax for now.
Yeah.
So road tax, you're going to pay an amount of road tax for an electric car, but I can see in the not too distant future we're going to end up with a model where you pay for your road tax based on how far you drive, where you drive, and when you drive.
Yep.
And I mean, I remember a few years ago now in my previous job before I did YouTube, in my telecoms job, we did a big project for, I'm just going to say, a UK network operator, mobile network operator. And they had a whole program on usage-based insurance. So basically I guess it's a little bit like a black box that you would have if you were a learner driver or a young driver. Very similar thing. You have a telemetry box in your car and it monitors where you're driving, how fast you're driving, and when you're driving, and then your insurance that you pay is based on that.
Yep.
So let's say you're driving under the speed limit all the time, and you're driving off-peak hours, and you're out and about in the countryside. Maybe you don't pay as much insurance as someone who speeds all the time, drives at night time in high-risk areas. That technology's there now. You can do that today. And I don't think it's a million miles off until we start seeing that rolled out. I think the big problem's probably backwards compatibility with old vehicles that don't have that kind of kit in it.
Yeah. But they will start getting stung in terms of fines. And I think it will get to a point where those older vehicles, there'll be more rules and stuff introduced, won't there?
Yeah.
That will stop people using them once again. Really damaging people that can't afford newer stuff. All these older cars are just going to be, apart from the really desirable ones that are once again going to be owned by people that can afford to own them and keep them and run them when they're allowed to. I think, electric. And I think that's the whole thing around electric cars or even modern day combustion engine cars. So the long-term M2 that I've got is the first press car that I've actually ever driven that's got this speed warning dong on it. Which, and we've talked about speeding on this channel a lot, and neither of us condone it, especially in built up areas. But let me tell you, when you've got a speed dong warning thing, it's not always right. Like all these speed, they get it wrong sometimes. So when that's wrong, then it's dong. But you go into a 30 zone at an indicated 31 miles an hour as you're slowing down, dung, 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 or you accelerate out of a 40 into a 50, but you're doing 42 by the time you get to the 50 sign, dung, dung, dung. And oh my goodness.
So I know. So the first time I came across that was on a Lexus about 6 months ago.
Yeah.
And I just thought it was a Lexus thing. And then, the beauty of being a YouTuber, when you put something out on YouTube, you get lots of feedback from people, and you read around a bit. It's a requirement now. New cars, it's an EU not legislation, regulation.
Regulation.
And new cars have an audible speed warning.
Yes.
Now, at the moment, you can turn it off. Yeah. Now, the nice thing about that M2 is that you've got their little customizable shortcuts widgets on the screen. So it's literally a swipe down and a push, and it's off.
Yeah.
In the Lexus I had, it was like 3 menus in. And the really annoying thing is you can't turn it off and then it's off.
Yeah.
You have to do it every time you start the car.
Yes. Same with the BM. But yeah,
it's like
the 3.
But how long is it going to be before that audible bong is a hard limit on the speed? Because the technology's there, right? All you need to do is change the software to stop it bonging and just put a limiter on the speed.
Well, yeah. I mean, it's there, isn't it? It's, as you say. And I think with electric cars especially, that's a whole nother level of literally, we don't want you driving your car today, we're just going to turn it off on the grid, or we're going to, there's an on and off switch, I'm sure Elon could just turn off, that Model Y you had recently. I bet you he could just, they'll be able to, I bet you they can shut them down remotely.
So it's not just electric cars. My Defender 90. It's if you've got the app.
No, that's because it's a JLR product. It just turns off.
Just turn off.
Yeah.
I won't have another long termer from JLR then. But the almost all new cars nowadays have an app, and those apps are connected to the car. You can reach into the car. You can turn the air conditioning on before you get in it. All those types of things. The Defender has basically a trip memory. You can go in and look at all the different journeys you've done and how far you've gone and how fast you've gone and what your MPG was. That's all captured by the car and fed into an app. Well, it's fed other places as well.
Of course.
But you're right. Any modern day car with connectivity, if Tesla can send an over-the-air update to suddenly give me autonomous driving, they can certainly send an over-the-air update to stop the car from working.
Yeah,
It's not rocket science.
No.
So it is an interesting one, and I think some of it will obviously, there's legalities and all of that kind of stuff. But I think we are in for interesting times. Let's go back to the speeding thing. People go, well, if you don't want to speed, then you shouldn't be worrying about it. I'll give you an example. You are on a national 60. You come up behind a car that's doing 44, let's 40, 45 miles an hour, and you go for an overtake, and you pull out to overtake. And you overtake and you exceed 60 miles an hour in the overtake for a brief moment.
Which is actually safer to do if you're limited, right?
Yeah. Okay. But imagine you have a speed limiter. So you pull out. You pull out to overtake and you've judged the gap.
Yeah.
And you pull out to overtake and you come out and you hit a speed limiter of 60 and it slows the car to 60. And then you're stuck in the danger lane while you've got something coming towards you, potentially.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I can just see it coming.
Yeah,
the speed bong. But then speed bongs, we're really getting it. Oh, I remember when I was a kid, you didn't know any of these things, did you?
I remember black and white TV.
I remember our telly only had 3 channels, mate. And my brother got a video recorder that had a remote control with a wire.
No.
It wasn't even wireless. Had a cable
Wow.
that stretched across the lounge.
3 channels, that wouldn't be bad. So I would probably have Petrol Ped, Joe Achilles, and the Drive Talk podcast.
Yeah, that'd be really good.
3
That's all
fantastic
the
channels.
channels you need, really.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's in the days before YouTube.
Yes. Oh, before YouTube. Oh, okay.
One of my mate's kids said to me one day, said, Daddy, said, when you were my age, was the internet in black and white?
Oh, brilliant. That's amazing.
So you got the speed bong thing.
Yeah.
The other bit of technology, and you've got the shortcut in your M2 to turn it off as well. And you know where I'm going with this, don't you?
Yeah.
Lane departure assistance. And again, that's a legal requirement in cars, right? I think it started with lane departure warning, where it would give you a beep or some audible tone.
Yeah.
But a lot of cars now, especially if they've got level 2 autonomous driving, will, as you start to veer out of your lane, will tug the steering wheel back in and pull you back into the lane.
Yeah.
It's on a motorway, if you've got adaptive cruise control set, level 2 autonomous driving set, it can be a useful thing. It can reduce the fatigue on you on a long journey.
Yes.
That's where it has its purpose. At all other times, for me personally, it's dangerous.
Yeah, I totally agree. And it's packaged as safety.
Oh, it's safety, yeah.
Safety stuff. And once again, I feel like we defend manufacturers a lot, but I think they deserve it because it's not the manufacturers. The speed bongs, these safety things, the OPF filters, the fact that wheels look like they're so far in the wheel arches, it's all restrictions or stipulations and rules and regulations that they need to adhere to put that product on the market. So we can't have a go at manufacturers. Maybe we can in the sense that we want it to be as easy as possible to turn off with most of these things. But the lane departure thing, we actually just talked about it off camera, and I've had a number of horrible experiences with that where I've not forgotten to turn it off, because you get in the car, you drive down the road, and it might not happen for 5 minutes, and then suddenly. And in fact, I was going down the country road near me where the lane markings aren't the best anyway, but the centre line is pretty good, but there's almost not enough room for a modern car that are all very wide. I was in the M2, which is exceptionally wide, and I was coming up behind a cyclist, and I'd obviously looked, there's nothing coming, it was a nice open road, so I'd just gently gone to go around the cyclist, and so I'd already left the lane, I was over the white line, so I'd already departed the lane. I'd indicated as well, because that sometimes helps with the devices. As I was just pulling alongside him, then the car decided, 1 second, you're out of your lane. What are you doing out there? And pulled it back. And it was again, it wasn't, I'm sure it wasn't much of a movement, but to me, it just scared the life out of me, because I thought, I was like...
I bet the cyclist had a moment as well.
Yeah, well, it happened just before I'd passed the cyclist, but it was one of those things, as a cyclist, and it didn't matter what it was a walker or even another car you're overtaking, but especially something like a cyclist, because they're not going to get away with being clipped by an M2. But it was just a horrible experience, and you think this is meant to be safety, and it's not. It's dangerous, and I can't see in many scenarios where it is actually going to aid safety things like the blind spot. There's a lot of modern technology that I think is great. Head-up display, fantastic. Should be in every car as far as I'm concerned. Keeps your eyes on the road. You've got everything you need in your vision. Most things, that's great, brilliant. Blind spot things in the mirrors really work and have got me out, especially when my chauffeuring days, because there's massive blind spots in a lot of modern cars because they're so big. And you got those little yellow warnings or whatever they might be, various manufacturers, and they're brilliant. They're just a simple bit of technology. You're like, I think there's a car there. Oh yeah, there's a car there because it's already flashing at me or whatever. So, but there's just so much stuff that again is just not safe. It's dangerous. Dangerous to people that can drive and actually do pay attention to what they're doing. Maybe would help the occasional sort of person.
I think it just, for me, it encourages laziness, really.
Yeah.
Because you just think, you think, well, lane departure warning, surely one of the basic, skills of driving a car is keeping it in the lane. It's been able to steer it down look, the road's bearing round to the left. I know, the steering wheel, I'm going to move it like this, and I'm going to drive round the corner.
Is that what that's...
Yeah, apparently, yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
I always just sort of rest my phone on that thing in front of me, but I always think they could have made a better.
Is that when you're doing live stories?
Yeah, live. So that's a joke, by the way. Don't use your phone at all when you're driving, or unless it's in a device and using Waze or whatever. Yeah. Even now, I'm more of a. It's funny up until
or you're doing like a one-handed launch control and filming it.
Yeah, I mean, just all the. It infuriates me when you see all that online. Just firstly, I know how easily you can get done by it, and you can get 6 points or something now.
Well, you should know, mate. You know,
I've been there, done that.
It's not when you want to do that again.
But I can't remember my train of thought. I've lost what I was talking about.
Just
now.
Using your phone.
Using your phone. Yeah, just don't do it. Android Auto, that's right. Thank you, Patrick. He is useful.
He's
sometimes.
very useful.
Yeah,
not
just Tesla.
Not only is he very knowledgeable about Tesla, he's like in the background shouting us instructions.
Yeah, he needs signs like that. Yeah. Applause, everyone.
Can we get 10?
Android. So it's funny. Up until the beginning, I reckon, end of last year.
Android is that? Oh, that's the kind of phone that poor people have.
This is an Android phone. It's a Google Pixel 7 Pro.
Actually, I'm always jealous of that because it takes amazing photos.
It does take really good photos. But yeah, I mean, listen, they've both got pros and cons. Android, but I mean, let's say Apple CarPlay or Android Auto. Yeah. Up until the end of last year, I've almost never ever used it on cars.
Really?
And it's really weird. People, including I'm sure Pat, would go on road trips. Why don't you use? No, I always liked my phone as a separate device on a phone holder running Waze, and that allowed everything on the infotainment screen to do whatever I wanted it to do. And infotainment screens and systems are getting better. So like, the iDrive 8 in the M2, the big curved display, love it or hate it, it's really good at giving you like two nice screens. So you can have, I don't know, like Spotify and Waze and anything else on there. It's really good. But older systems, it was difficult, or you'd have to have it all on one screen. So you'd have to swap between. But I've really got into it this year. Everything I borrow press-wise or anything that I own, I literally put it on, and it's really good. And I'll tell you why it is good. It's good because
you use Android Auto now.
And Lou uses both because she's got a work phone and a personal phone, and it's just good because it does separate. You learn to use everything on the screen. A lot of the time, I don't even put my phone in the holder anymore. It would just go in the glove box or stay in my pocket, whatever. And so I think it's very the systems are getting better, aren't they? The tech, that sort of side of tech, as you would hope, is improving. Whereas the safety tech is definitely not, as far as I'm concerned.
Although a comment I get a lot in videos, and it's more prevalent when you do a car that has a big screen.
Yep.
And let's face it, often they're electric cars.
Yep.
Tesla, Mustang Mach-E, those types of things. The question is, how come it's not legal for you to use a phone while you're driving, yet all of these modern cars have the biggest touch screen, which, let's face it, is just a big phone, and it is legal to use those while you're driving? I don't have the answer to that question, by the way. My only caveat would be probably on most things when you've got a big screen, most of the things, the setup things, you wouldn't do while you're driving. You do them once and they're done.
Yep.
The main thing, you might, I don't know, adjust the climate control or change a channel on your radio or look at another podcast or something.
Another podcast?
Yeah,
sure.
Yeah.
Is
the next episode. The next episode.
Oh, the next episode.
Yeah,
right,
the next episode. Yeah. So, but it is a good point.
Yeah, no, I think that's another thing, isn't it? The touchscreen, as you say, I've always found them distracting, and I know a lot of people out there. I think the younger generation that are used to their phones and their iPods and their iPads, rather, they're growing up around them. They're probably a bit more savvy with it. But I don't care how good you are with your phone when it's a static thing connected to your hand. It's very easy to do things. But when you've got a screen in a car on a UK road that is not particularly smooth, because none of us are paying road tax or any kind of tax, so our roads are atrocious. That was a joke, by the way. Then when you factor all that in, it's really difficult to manage to focus on driving and play around with this ever moving screen. That it's just, I've sometimes just find it does infuriate me, but the more time you spend with it, and like you said, the more once you get everything kind of set up, then you're not constantly going on the screen to play around with things. Hopefully you've got something like, in the M2, you've still got the iDrive controller, which is a brilliant invention. I hope it doesn't ever go completely. It will. You've got that. You've got your voice control commands, which I don't like. Your steering wheel buttons, which are a lot easier to use. But yeah, I think it's interesting, isn't it? I think the whole touchscreen, you see manufacturers like Audi, they were one of the first to really go full touchscreen, and with their A6, A8, the Q8, all those sort of their higher end models. And I remember when they all came out 4 or 5 years ago, it was like, wow. And it still is a wow factor. The S8 you had, when you get in there and everything's off, and it just looks beautiful. It looks like a high-end Swiss kitchen or something. Everything's just perfect. And then you fire it up and it all comes to life. But in reality, when you're using it, it's not the best system in the world, and it's just grubby fingerprints everywhere. But I think they're coming back. You'll see that they're slowly reintroducing buttons.
Yep. I was at VW. I'm just thinking embargo-wise. Yeah, I think the embargo's lifted for this. The new Tiguan.
Yep.
Passat. Oh, sorry, the new Tiguan Passat doesn't have it, but that now has. So it's got full touchscreen.
Yep.
But they brought back the little kind of jog wheel, and it's not controllable, configurable. So if you swipe your finger across it to the right, it changes its function.
Right.
So you can have it as a volume knob for your radio. You can have it as a heat control for your climate control.
Yes.
You can use it as a jog wheel to get you around and navigate. Your kind of cursor key, if you like. Around it's coming back.
Good. Okay. It's good. Well, I'm glad that they've kind of learnt. I know Volkswagen in particular have had a tricky few years with their current infotainment system. So much so that a lot of people were returning cars or not buying another Volkswagen because they didn't like it. So I think they really had to stand up and listen. And actually, and it's good that they are changing and adapting things. And again, I do feel sorry for the manufacturers that are having to tick so many boxes. They're trying to make interiors more modern. They're trying to introduce as much tech as possible and trying to do it in a way that we can all relate to, i.e. touchscreen, etc. But sometimes they'll go too far and go, oh, actually, this isn't working. In reality, it's just not working. And I think the time span as well, back in the day when we were younger, back in the black and white days, cars, they'd probably test cars for 4 or 5 years. They'd run them out and, whatever, test everything, make sure ergonomics good. But nowadays, because the tech is moving so fast, they can't test these systems for years and years, can they?
Well, it's the Google model. So Google, they put stuff out there that isn't finished.
Yeah.
Basically, every 10 apps they release, maybe they'll succeed with one and the other 9 won't work and they'll just bin them.
Yeah.
They'll put them out. They might put beta somewhere in the text, so it's not quite finished. And I think that kind of model of releasing stuff is how you innovate quickly.
Yep.
And I think I've seen it in the telecom space, and I think we see it in the automotive space. I think there is an argument almost for a manufacturer, developing your own MMI satellite navigation system is immensely expensive.
Yep.
And that's why we see the likes of some of the Stellantis companies working with people like TomTom to do their sat nav.
Yeah.
And my argument would be, why don't you just use Apple CarPlay and Android Auto? Just on the phone anyway.
Get rid of it all.
Because the only time now, I'm totally the opposite to you. I will always use Apple CarPlay.
Yep.
But now I'm having to almost stop using it to make sure I use the inherent sat nav in the vehicle.
Yep.
The Tesla I had recently, you can't use Apple CarPlay. They don't support it. You have to use their own sat nav.
Okay.
But that's because that's linked to their charge network, and you get all that functionality. So sometimes I give a car a hard time, especially electric cars. But you would probably find the functionality, if you're using their native sat nav, is in there.
Yep.
But I don't just get in and use Waze.
Okay.
Because it tells you where the speed cameras are, and it tells you where, the big one for me about things like Waze, and there are other sat nav systems, but Waze is particularly good at warning you about things like cars stopped at the side of the road, potholes, and so on, because it's this community of users. If you see a car stopped at the road, you quickly hit a button and say car stopped on shoulder, and it feeds to everybody else, and it's live data then.
Yep. That's actually really handy on the motorbike. Potholes and things, stuff that you
Roadkill.
Roadkill. Well, all these things, you do look at and think, oh, okay, in the car. But when you're on a bike, you go, oh, okay, I'm going to pull back even further from the truck in front. So I've got a massive view of the road in front, because he might have just gone through a pothole, and by the time I see it appear from the truck, it's too late, So yeah, it's very interesting. But as you say, I think the whole just strip it all out and connect to the phone. But yeah, I think my old man would struggle with that. I know this is the second time I'm talking about my dad on this episode, but I think he still runs.
Can we talk about your mum? I like your mum.
Oh yeah, I'm yeah. Who's youngest out of us? Remember? Yeah. No, Dad still runs a 3310 Nokia or something.
Do you know, it's funny you should say that though, that the 1M we had when we went to the Nürburgring, I don't know if you lifted the center console.
Yes.
But there was a Nokia, it was I can't remember the designate, like a 6310 or something, that old school. I was like, oh wow.
The old charger in there. Yeah.
Because for a while, those were going, that Nokia, I can't remember the designate, 6310 I think it was like super popular, but they were selling on eBay for like 300-400 quid.
Yep.
And the reason, because people were like using them, and then obviously they kind of they get broken or damaged, but people had that in their car,
of course.
So they had to buy one to fit in their car.
Wow.
I mean, that was back in the days when you used to have a car. If you wanted a car phone, you'd have like a thing screwed into the dashboard, like the holders and stuff.
Yeah.
And you'd buy a second-hand car, and there'd be like 3 screw holes in the dashboard where somebody had had a phone.
All the ex-fleet cars, especially.
Oh, yeah. Oh man, in fact, my brother's first car, when he had his, I think he was one of the first people I know to have a car phone. The phone unit was in the boot.
Wow.
The only thing that was in the car was the actual handset.
Oh,
and
so
it was on it was a proper handset, like, with a twisty wire, none of this Bluetooth rubbish.
I bet you've got one of them. Or did you have one of them?
No, I didn't.
Oh.
No, I didn't join. I started telecoms in 1999. So
yeah,
a bit after that. But I've still got some of my old phones. I've still got my first 3G phone.
Okay.
That's in a box in the loft somewhere. Probably works still, I would have thought.
Yeah, it's probably still charged if it's on. It's probably still got battery.
Well, no, it came with 2 batteries.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, an NEC 606, terrible device.
Wow.
But yeah, it came with 2 batteries.
NEC, that brings back memories.
You remember, when people other than Apple and Samsung made phones?
I remember the Blackberry, because when I worked at Storm, my previous life, and we all had Blackberries, as most people in the business world did, I guess. And I used to love my Blackberry and the little toggle. Remember the little? And I used to be able to. I could type on that faster than I could on a keyboard. Actually, I was just loved it. And I remember when there was talk in the office of, or all our office or company phones were going to move away from them. I think we went to iPhone. I was devastated because that was such a brilliant phone.
So this is the completely accidental segue, right? So a couple of weeks ago, one of my mates, big shout out to Tarun. I worked with him years ago, Ray Castle, like 2000, 2001. And we were doing a lot of training for Blackberry. And he was actually training Blackberry one day. And somebody said, oh, you're really good. You should come and work for me. And he did the normal, you can't afford me. And the guy went, why don't you try that theory out? And anyway, he gave him a number and went to work for Blackberry.
Wow.
And he still works there. All right. So, but Blackberry don't make phones anymore.
I was going to say, yeah, I've not seen one ever for years.
Any idea what they make?
Oh, this is going to be something very random. Fruit? Blackberries?
Nope. They're responsible for pretty much every operating system in every car other than Tesla.
No way. Wow. Okay, and that makes sense.
That's what they do. They do other things as well, but their main business now is automotive operating systems.
Wow.
And they provide operating systems for manufacturers who then obviously kind of white label them into their own, but the back end of everything but Tesla, pretty much.
That is fascinating. Wow.
Told you it was a good segue.
That is a good segue. Wow.
So, because I didn't even know. We went out for a bike ride the other week and we were chatting away, and I'm like, oh my God, I didn't know that. Because I knew the demise of the Blackberry handset and the reasons behind that and all that kind of stuff. Because they went from like hero to zero. They were massive.
Yep.
And especially in the enterprise or business to business. So everybody who was in business had a Blackberry.
Yep.
And then along comes iPhone and Android, and I think the industry were quite, I don't know, it's blasé or they just thought, hey, Apple, what do they know about making phones? Hey,
yeah,
they're never going to be any good.
No.
Oops. But yeah.
Wow.
There you go.
Oh, that's I did not know that. Well, there you go. I wonder how many of you guys and girls knew that. It's let us know in the comments.
So now we were talking about operating systems. Should be Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. Maybe this should be BlackBerry.
Yes.
They can have,
We might see the return of the BlackBerry name as well.
Well, originally it was Research in Motion was the company,
Okay.
and the phone was called a BlackBerry,
Yes.
and then everybody kind of knew and then they Research in Motion or RIM changed their name to BlackBerry,
Okay.
and they're still BlackBerry, but they kind of just do stuff that you don't hear about.
Yeah.
Okay.
Fascinating. Well, that's
So
mate, we're almost at the hour. Believe it or not, I can't believe that. It's good. I think when we get into a good old man rant.
Can you imagine what would be like if we had a couple of beers?
Oh,
Well,
I think we need to do that one day. We need to go and stay somewhere so we can responsibly have a few.
do a
have a few
while we're
beers.
drinking beers.
Yeah.
What do you think to that, Pat? Pat's happy about that because he's off camera and be like,
Yeah, obviously Pat would be doing it as well. But talking about, I don't think we actually said where we were, but if you'd watched a previous episode, you probably recognise this spot. We're back at Podium Place, which is obviously a regular podcast location.
HQ.
Yeah, it is Podcast HQ, yeah. But we're in the roastery, the coffee roastery, hence the big bags behind us, this big bag next to me. And the cars behind that. So that behind us is actually the cafe. So if you do come down, which I do recommend, have a coffee, have some food, play on the sim. If you look to the right when you're walking up to the counter, you'll see in here. And that's where we are. We're normally in the paddock, which is really cool. But this is a nice. I think this is my
nice change of scene.
Yeah, I think this is my new favourite location. I like
because the air conditioning is lovely.
The air
It's hot,
condi-
and
yeah.
it's hot as you like outside.
It is. And obviously a big shout out, not that we really needed to in this episode, because I think we've accidentally got it plastered everywhere.
Yeah.
Big shout out to our sponsors, Michelin.
Yeah.
Or as you pronounce it.
Michelin.
Yeah.
Well, it's hard to do the French thing.
Yeah.
I get grief for that.
Well, you shouldn't get grief. You just pronounce things properly.
Yeah.
Where you go, "Whoa, Michelin. Anyway.
On that bombshell.
Yeah. Thanks a lot for watching.
Tune in next time and we'll see you soon.